Welcome all. Thank you for giving us your time this evening. Some of you came into the webinar a couple of weeks ago, so hopefully you found that enjoyable. You've had recordings of those if you registered, and likewise this evening. We are recording, so there will be a recording sent out to you, so you can, if you do just have to go and do something else, then you'll get a recording and you can fast forward or go into whichever part you want, really. So we've got three distinguished gentlemen with us tonight, all from different parts of the country, all from different backgrounds. So we'll come to them individually shortly. But there is obviously a very common thread, which is the fact that we work very closely with Ben and Sion and Matt, and they form part of 22 breeding partners that we have. And the reason really we decided to go down the route of breeding partners was that it's expensive to farm, and we just couldn't really face actually having to have the numbers we wanted to fulfill our supply and ambition by owning all the genetics in-house. So we decided quite early on that we would use a model where we worked with some very good farmers, quite often customers first, and we could see how they were operating, and gradually that's evolved into being the 22 breeding partners. We are always looking for people to work with us, but obviously we have a commitment to make sure that the existing relationships and the financials work for everybody in the group. So that's probably enough for me for now. You will see at the bottom of your screen, there is an opportunity to ask questions. So please feel free to type any questions in there, and Laurie, who's administrating this, will give them to us, and I'll keep an eye on them, and I'll ask them as we go if they're pertinent, or we'll answer them on the screen for you, either one or the other. So I'm sure, don't hold back. If there's anything that you're not sure of or you want answers, then just type them in as we go, and we'll try and deal with them the best we can. So very informal. We wouldn't have it any other way. Like I say, Matt's in his pajamas there. So you can see, thankfully, you can just see his headshot. So we're going to start with Ben Anthony, top right here from me. And I think, Laurie, you'll share the screen for Ben. And I'm going to really leave it to Ben to tell us his journey, the good and the bad and the ugly. We'll take questions as we go. All yours, Ben.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I've done plenty of talks in the last few years, but the first webinar I've ever done. So it's a bit strange not seeing a crowd in front of me. So as I said, my name's Ben Anthony. We farm near Whitland in West Wales. Rowan Farm. It's a fairly small farm, really, 110 acres of clean ground, and then we rent another 110 acres on top of that. It's a fairly good farm. We can grow most things that we want to grow, and it grows well in this area. So we're an Innovis breeding partner, and then we also have a enterprise doing turkeys and chickens for the Christmas market, sold farm gate. So we roughly do 560 turkeys and about 200 chickens. So it's a busy time at Christmas. So I'll talk about our original farm business. We started farming in 2010. We took over from Diana's parents. So we originally beef and sheep, and then we were running 750 breeding ewes, carrying 200 replacement ewe lambs. And we had 15 suckler cows. We did have 40, but we reduced them quite dramatically. The farm, as I said, is made up. It's 145 acres with 35 acres of woodland. We try and maximize everything we do, really. We planted some of the steeper banks and rough ground with trees. We try and make all areas of the farm work for us. We rent another 100 acres fairly close to the farm. A couple of next door neighbours, we rent some off each, which I never want to be a tarmac farmer and running miles and miles checking sheep every day. This system, as you can see, worked for us quite well. We were winners of the Farmer's Guardian Sheep Innovator of the Year 2016. And then we were runner up in the Royal Welsh Sir Brynner Jones Award 2018. That was for efficient sheep production. So our system was working well for us, but an opportunity came up, so we changed things around a bit. And also we're a demonstration farm for Farming Connect from, I think it was 2012 or 13 for an 18-month stint, which I learned a lot on that journey as well.
And I held my breath then for a minute because I thought you said things were working well until you started breeding rams for Innovis. But I can breathe again. So.
You might have to get your oxygen cylinder out in a minute. No. Yeah, so the aims of our enterprise for our commercial flock back in 2012, we set ourselves some aims. I think it's very important to have some aims in your whatever you do, whatever system you run. Was have a simple, sustainable system. Originally, we used to rear our own ewe lambs and keep them on. But I started to realize very quickly on that we were sorting fat lambs in May, June, and pulling the best not single lambs off, twin lambs off that could have gone to slaughter, being worth 80 to 100 pounds, and then keeping them a full year before you had in return from them. So I thought there had to be a better system out there. So we started to make us think. And then we wanted to be finished all our lambs off a forage-based system and run our ewes on a forage-based system. And then we set ourselves a scanning target of 180 to 185%, and then rearing or selling 165%. These are targets that we worked together with Farming Connect when we were a demonstration farm that would make us a sustainable, profitable farm, and then obviously then reduce costs and reduce inputs on the farm. Now I remember we did have a few more cows than we've got now, but we used to use about 25 to 26 tons of fertilizer a year when we first started. We used to use roughly the same in bought-in feeds. And last year I bought just roughly 6.5 ton of fertilizer, and only 6 ton of bought-in feed for the ewes was bought in. So we've reduced massively our running costs, but the way we've done that is through improving the farm, so putting different lays in and growing crops to suit the flock's needs. So that's how we reduced our inputs. So as I mentioned, we set ourselves targets in 2012 to make things work a bit better. So 2010 was our first year. We took over in January 2010. So 2011 was our first ever scanning. So we scanned at 150%. Losses to turnout, you can see the losses. I'll explain 12 and 13 in a second. So as you can see, our scanning is built year on year, really. Now in 2012, we became an Innovis customer. We bought some rams, and then that year we had a phone call from Adrian, who was a sales person then, would be interested in some Aberfield cross ewe lambs. So we thought we'd give him a go. And that year we kept 40 of our own and sort of compared them side by side. So we lambed them as ewe lambs, and then tapped them then the following autumn, and I was only scanned at 150%, where the Aberfield scanned at 180 as yearlings. So yeah, sort of the decision was made, and they were a lot better mothers than our own Texel crosses. So the decision was made that we'd buy our replacements in. So then, as you can see, going through the years, scanning got better and better and better, and that is down to bringing more and more Aberfield cross ewes into the flock. 2012 and 13, you'll see we got massive lamb losses from scanning to turnout, and that's due to enzootic abortion. We had a massive problem. We buried our heads in the sand a bit the first year, but obviously we got on top of it then 2014 onwards, and we enzo-toxovac the ewes and brought that down. As you can see, our rearing percentage, well, our selling percentage was absolutely bang on. It was really, really good. Probably the highest we've ever been is selling 184. But yeah, we've done it. But it's always been respectable. But yeah, so
Ben, can I just add, there is a question from Cormac on the chat here,
yeah,
asking, is the 165 reared inclusive of replacements in the calculation, or is that without your
no, that's without replacements. That's just sold off the ewes. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so we sort of every year then we've scanned above 185, and yeah, the Aberfield Cross flock did us really well. So we struck up not a deal, a partnership, I suppose, with a producer called Earl Jones, who's got Tregaron type Welsh, and we went there every year to buy our replacement ewe lambs, and the relationship became a lot closer, and then we work with him to buy the rams to produce our ewe lambs. So we were trying to increase or increase scanning percentage or hold it where we wanted it. So we went out together and looked at rams in Innovis, and then he purchased those rams and for us to purchase ewe lambs back off him. And it's a system that worked really, really well. We had a really, really good relationship. I wouldn't bother going to see the lambs. When he was ready, I'd send a lorry and they picked up and delivered to us, and we'd pay him. Next slide, please, Laurie. So I think the biggest drivers in our old commercial flock that has really moved things forward is obviously the ewe genetics, and then the ram selection and genetics that produce those fat lambs that go off farm nice and early and make us some money. Things we learned along the way was how important ewe body condition score were. We found the Aberfield Cross was holding condition better than our traditional ewes. Ewe nutrition, the whole picture throughout the year is so important to keep those ewes in the right place where they need to be through the year. And then I mentioned that we grow different crops, so we grow different crops to suit what we need at each time of year. So, and then we move lambing. We used to traditionally lamb end of January, and we moved lamb into March, and we were still selling lambs at the same time. So second, third week of June, we were still selling lambs, which we thought we'd be, well, a lot later. We started selling lambs from 9 to 12 weeks old, obviously singles, but selling lambs. Grassland management is something, well, I've improved on a lot. There's still a lot I could do, but I'm reasonably good at it. And then, as I mentioned, the rams, using performance recorded rams, picking the traits that worked for us. And then we use teaser rams, which give us a tighter lambing, so you're more on the ball when you are actually lambing, and then you've got more uniform lambs to sell and treat in the groups. Early weaning, I think, is a really important one. When I say early weaning, we wean at try an average age of roughly 12 weeks. This does a number of things. We did some trial work on it, and the lambs motored on after they were weaned. They were doing another 100 grams a day after they were weaned compared to when they were on their mother. And then it also gives the ewe more time to recover for the next tupping cycle. So in amongst all our commercial flock, we were recording a hell of a lot of data, especially for a commercial system. We're recording our scanning data. We're tagging lambs at birth, linking the dams to sires, recording lamb losses and why, and that's a really important one, because we all forget. You think, oh, yeah, lambing was bad at the time, but you go 2 months after lambing and you forget, oh, it wasn't so bad when the sun's shining. So I think it's really important to jot down why lambs are dying, and if there's a pattern, speak to your vet and you can draw up a plan and get it sorted. 8-week weights to see how the ewes were performing, how good they were milking and looking after their lambs. Weigh-in and condition score in the ewes, which is important. We found, well, the Aberfields were lighter than Aberfield crosses were lighter than our traditional ewes we had on the farm. So we could keep more ewes per acre or hectare than we could of our traditional ewes. So again, producing more lambs off the same acreage. Recording lamb weights pre-slaughter to see how they performed. Obviously, we kept the slaughter reports. Problem ewes we used get rid of, and then we'd weigh the lambs or every other time they come through for weaning, worming, weaning, whatever. The data was recorded so we could have it there if we needed to look at it. I'm not saying to use it 100%, but it was there if we thought we had a problem, and we could refer back to that data.
And I've just got a question from Cormac again in terms of, have you ever had any issues tagging lambs at birth, any infections?
No, we keep our tags in surgical spirits. So when they're going around tagging, they keep them in surgical spirits. I know some people put some blue spray on their ears as well when they do it. We haven't actually done that. We just put them in surgical spirits and they seem to be fine. So all this recording we've been doing for the last, well, we started probably 2013, recording like I was just talking about, led us on then to do some trial work for Innovis, and was it Keepak then, Dewi, or was it St. Marion?
It was, yeah. We were working, I'll continue to do so really with Keepak, and this was really to actually progeny test some of the rams to make sure that what we thought we were going to get in terms of the performance of the Primera stroke Focus Primes was actually going to be translated onto farm. And obviously Ben had a very good commercial flock. That was a great testing site to do that with. So that was the logic behind it, really.
Yes, so obviously we were recording a lot of the data already required. And also we had a pretty even flock. So like they were all Aberfield Cross Welsh, probably by the time we started this process. So this was quite an interesting trial, and it made us realize how quickly genetics can be moved on through a breeding program to hit market specifications and help farmers. So there's sort of the findings that we found. You can see on the first graph on my top right, daily live weight gain to 8 weeks, and then you can see the industry standard. Well, the Focus Prime was always way ahead of that, and as you can see, sort of year on year, it did build, so they grew faster. And then the same with carcass weights. The first year was 18.2 average, but by 2020 we got up to 20.1 average. So as you can see, and then the same then with the E and U gradings. Like a lot of people say, you won't get E's or U's out of a Primera or Focus Prime, but as you can see, we're up to 59, 57% E and U carcasses. The rest being R grade then. So it's very interesting to see how quickly genetics could move forward with the right selection of rams. So our current farm business has changed quite dramatically, really. We have less ewes now on farm, so we're around 500 stud ewes, made up of 400, just over 400 Aberfields and about 80 Abermacs ewes. We retain roughly 180 ewe lambs because the flock is still growing, so I would say 90% of those are elites, so the top 25% of the breed, and then there's a few nice selects that we've kept, which is the top 50% of the breed. Then we've got 190 ram lambs which have gone into winter, ready for next year's ram sales. Obviously they'll drop down the numbers as we go through winter. Well, they've just MOT this week. I think there's 15 or 16 being pulled out this week on structure of various things, testicles or feet or whatever it is. So they'll be culled out now and leave us with a better selection of rams for next year. So we've currently only got 2 cows now. Yeah, so they're a bit of my partner's pets. yeah, so they're still here. So we're still carrying on with the turkeys and chickens. We as I said, we do about between I think 750 somewhere there. We've gone into bees, so we've got 30 beehives producing honey. Quite an interesting one. This we always fancied having some bees, so we got some bees, but it changes the way you farm slightly. It makes your clover in your fields more important to you, so you're almost getting a secondary crop. This year, well, this summer just gone, we probably harvested over 1,000 pounds of honey. If I sell the honey in big buckets, it's worth about £4.50 a pound, so that's £4,500 worth of honey. If I sell it farm gate, I'm getting £9 a pound in jars, so it's about £9,000. So it's to think then it's sort of a secondary crop. It's quite good. There's a bit of work to it, don't get me wrong, but it's quite a good thing, and it encourages you to farm your clover better. We're going into free range eggs production shortly. We're just starting the journey. We've got planning permission, and sheds are booked and chickens are booked, so it's going to be a frantic year. So why did we become a breeding partner? Well, that's a good question. We were offered the opportunity well, we bought some Abermaxes back in 2017. I think it was 40 or 50 for the first year. And we did have roughly, we went up to about 120, 130 Abermaxes. But I'll show you a graph now, and our Abermax flock was running slightly behind where we wanted it. There was too many lower grade ewes, so we've had a look at that this year, and reduced the numbers but kept the better ewes. So becoming a breeding partner, we wanted to try and add value to what we do, because we did all the recording. It's something that interests us, and to produce good genetic rams for the commercial farmer. In 2017-18, I worked for Innovis as a sales, the same as Matt used to, technical sales advisor. Through that time, obviously, I spoke to hundreds of farmers probably, and so I had an insight into what customers wanted. So that's given me insight into how we need to improve the Aberfield and the Abermax. There are not many negatives I've heard about either, but I suppose I got a bit of inside knowledge on where if people wanted the breed to go or felt the need to go. So then in 2020, we got offered the chance to buy a substantial part of quite a big flock. So we took that opportunity. We sold all our commercial ewes, and we've embraced being a breeding partner with both hands, and currently working to improve. So our aims for our flocks is to increase the index of our Abermax ewes. As I said, they're running slightly behind other flocks, and I always aim to try and be as good as anything I do. I try to be good at. So, as I said, we've rationalized our flock. We've gone through them in the autumn and reduced numbers, but kept quality. The Aberfield, if there was the only sort of negative comment I had about the Aberfield, that possibly scanning percentage wasn't high enough in some flocks, but you've seen my results in my commercial flock, and they were scanning very well. So that's something, since I've had the flock, is obviously to increase the overall index of the flock, and to increase the scanning percentage of the breed. So when the rams come to you, you can pick rams that will lift your scanning percentage higher than possibly have before. Which this year's scanning results you can see has worked. Janet, our geneticist, broke them down for us this week. Our mature ewe scanned at 103%. This is the Aberfields, and the yearling scanned at 181. So I was very pleased on the year, and in our area, there's scanning is definitely between 20 and 30% down. So it's yeah, I'm very, very pleased with that. Breed out Entropion is something that I'm working on, well, and Innovis as a whole is working on, but it's something, a goal of mine is to breed that out. We don't get many, but 10 is too many. But we, as part of the recording, we breed for record for Entropion, and that's they don't go back into the breeding program or sold as rams. So well, as anybody does, we want to keep the genetics moving forward year on year and as fast as possible. So when I'm picking stock sires, I try to go for all A grades or very high B grades to keep my flock moving forward as fast as we can. And then obviously listen to the customer, and the feedback that you give us is so important, and then we'll try and act on it.
Ben, I've just got a question that's come up in terms of, do you know what the mature weight of your Aberfield ewes is?
I do.
Do you want to tell us?
I'm thinking. It's up there somewhere. Kim, Janet sent us a report the other day. I think it's around.
I would have expected the purebred ewes, if that's what you want to call them, to be playing mid 70 kilos, I would have thought.
Yeah, I was going to say in the 70s. It was about 74, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and that'll be about right, because the Aberfield, we've got a breeding value for you weight, so you can go lower or bigger than that. But generally, because they're producing crossing sire, the mature ewes themselves are sitting normally sort of 72, 73 kilos. So, but
yeah, that's just what I thought it was, somewhere there. And the album maxes are slightly heavier.
Yeah, and the follow-on question to that, was there an increase or decrease in your carrying costs? But I think you've probably found a decrease compared to the base flock you had, haven't you? I would imagine.
Yeah. But as I said, yeah, they're a lot easier to keep than our traditional Texel crosses. And from feet, if I've treated 10 ewes since lambing, I think that's as much as ever. Yeah, and obviously anything with persistent lameness or anything, it goes down the road anyway. But hand on heart, if we've treated 10 ewes since lambing, that's it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just conscious of time, Ben.
Yeah, we're almost there. We're almost there.
I'll stop asking questions. That might help my net.
So as you can see, we bought the flock in autumn 2020. So we've only got a couple of years data, but you can see how quickly us selecting the right rams, we've pushed it forward. We're above the Aberfield average now. And then, as I talked about, our Abermaxes are slightly under average for the Abermax population, while I went on the other side of that line. So that's why I've done my rationalization cull and only kept the best ewes. And as you can see, everything's gone forward on these as well. Our lambing percentage has gone up, and then our index of our tupping, our whole index has gone up as well on both graphs. So our flocks are going forward quite nicely, really. So any questions, or however you do it? Yeah, thank you all for your time. If you ever want to get in touch and ask me questions direct, I'm on Twitter. So I'm Ben Weinbauer on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I started a Facebook page called Farm Rowan. Please give it a follow. I like to just try and educate the public out there, because we seem to be fighting with a lot of anti-farming things at the moment. So I just want to try and publicize what we do a bit. I'm on Instagram as well, but I don't know how to use it really. I'm just an Instagram stalker. So that's it from me. So if there's any questions, please get in touch.
Your trusted assistant, Diana, she's just put up there that the Aberfield mature ewe average weight was 74 kilos going to the top, and the average condition score was 3.3 pre-lambing. So,
yeah.
There you go. Thank you, Diana, who's probably in the background there, so I'm making it all work as usual. So
I'm out of our house because of the kids. I've been sent out.
Great. Look, hopefully, I think there's a very good journey that Ben's gone on from probably a more typical system to really pushing the farm in terms of what he was doing, in terms of grassland management, in terms of the genetics, to giving us a very good testing ground for us to make sure that what we breed for works, to then becoming a very valued breeding partner, and valued from the point of view of listening to customers, being very intuitive in what he thinks the market needs, and balancing what is probably a good sheep in terms of structure and type with the figures to actually give something that people will be attracted to. So thank you, Ben. So we'll probably come back if there's questions at the end, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
And obviously, I'm sure Ben is always welcoming to people, Ben and Diana, if people are nearby, you're always happy to have people come visit, aren't you, Ben?
Yeah. We'll do our best.
If you're not laying foundations for your new chicken unit. So
yeah.
Right, we'll go straight on to Sean, if that's all right. Sean Williams, farm manager at Bow Hill in Buccleuch, but I'll leave you, Sean, to give us the rundown on. We're very close to Sean in many ways. He's our landlord as well, so we have to be very nice to him at stages. So all yours, Sean.
I know. Thank you, Dewi. Welcome everyone to hopefully hear what I've got to say, but it'll be something a bit different to the last one, I would say. Looking at Ben, I'm the amateur compared to what Ben's just put up, so it'll be interesting to see how things progress with you down there. It's looking great. Yeah, so next slide, please. I run the farms on Bow Hill Estate. So Bow Hill Estate is part of Buccleuch Estates, which is ultimately owned by the Buccleuch family. So total land mass sits just about 210,000 acres. So most of our land obviously is let out to different tenancies, but we do farm a considerable amount ourselves now. So the land mass is spread from, majority of it's in the Scottish borders, Dumfries, Galloway, just north of the border, basically. But we do have a small block down at Northampton near Kettering. So that's the major lie of the land. I'm responsible day to day for what you see on the map, basically, which sits to the west of Selkirk. Selkirk population sits roughly about 15,000 people. So it gives you the idea of scale of what you're on about. So we farm then all the way down to the Dumfries Galloway border at Linnup, which is south of Hawick and north of Langham. So we do have two kind of satellite farms that are away from the main holding. What you'll probably see though is, that although it's a big landmass we farm, most of the type of ground we farm is not the best quality. It's mostly kind of heather moorland type stuff. So you're into hill sheep country really. So that's the majority of the type of land that we farm. Next slide, please. So stock enterprises, traditionally this is a beef and sheep enterprise. When I started, we had 3,000 breeding ewes, 300 cows on about 5,000 acres. So it's trebled in size, and we've increased the sheep numbers and cattle numbers with it as we've moved along the line. So we run just over 8,500 breeding ewes. They're all split up to different enterprises, so we can see how well each farm performs. So it's all broken down by farm or by man on the ground, because those are the two things that will kind of impact an enterprise to a degree of environmental for the farm side, i.e. disease, weather conditions, to the actual member of staff on the ground. So, which is really important for our side of the business to get it to work. Suckler cows, we run 2 herds, totaling about 540 total, but 200 of them are pedigrees and the rest are cross sucklers producing store calves. And then we do produce our own crops in-house to try and mitigate what we're buying into the business. So yeah, we cut a lot of silage, we grow a lot of kale for fattening lambs. We grow some cereal crops to supplement either the store ration for the sheep or, growing the breeding ration for the breeding ewes and the store ration for the calves. So everything's fed in-house to try and reduce our outlying costs. And then back in 2005, we diversified to poultry. We built kind of the second type of its shed in the UK at the time, which is a 32,000 free range hen shed, and that's been ongoing in the business ever since then. We haven't increased further because there's been tensions in the egg industry, as you're well aware, in the press, but it's been like that for a number of years. But the tide's actually starting to change on the egg enterprise at the moment, as the egg prices start to climb, as the food security becomes a bit of a worry on the egg front. Next slide. So then in 2016, we diversified again. So we now have a biogas plant. It basically produces electricity from livestock manures produced on farms. Most of the hen manure and the cattle dung goes into that. So we feed it roughly about 8,000 tons of muck every year that gets topped up with silage when and where required to fill the missing gaps. Obviously the cows are outside in the summertime, so we have to feed something into it to keep it going. But it's identical to a living organism. It needs fed just like cows do. And you can't change the diet as easy, so you just monitor the ration just the same. Interesting thing on this plant is it's kind of changed things on its head, really. You know, it's mitigated a lot of costs to the business as well as adding value. So we've reduced our fert usage from 2016 was 251 tons of nitrogen used to 65 last year. I think this year we'll be hopefully we'll be down to 0 is the plan. So that's going to make a big difference for us going forward. And then as a result of Brexit, quite a worry for us, seriously exposed in lamb job. There's big threats with potential lamb exports. It's going to be a big hit. So we started looking outside the box and seeing what was fitting into what we could add to the business. So we went into deer in 2018. And so they're producing venison for Dovecote Park. There's a 6-month supply chain there, and they're supplying M&S and Waitrose. So that's been a great addition to the enterprise. It's positive without subsidy compared to beef and sheep has been, and it's been another good thread to the business to give us some stability going forward. Next slide. So we'll probably concentrate on the sheep side as it's an Innovis thing. So rather than going and looking at all the other aspects of the business, but yeah. So the sheep wise, as I mentioned earlier, mostly hill sheep country. So we run about 4,800 blackies, about 2,500 Cheviots. They're running at about 102%. So we're not looking for big numbers of twins with these, because ultimately we would need enough to replace themselves and enough to produce replacements for the low ground. So 2/3 of these are kept pure, and the other third are crossed. And they're, so the third crossed are producing replacements for the low ground. They're all a closed flock, replacing known rams. And then we also got involved with Innovis on the DNA profile flock that we put in place at Eldenhope. So we started producing pedigree Cheviots for selling. And that's been quite challenging, to be honest, because, hill sheep farming is not the best. And when you start putting DNA costings against them, it's quite expensive to run. So, but I think there's a positive thing for us. We're managing a flock. We've got a hill flock with EBVs. So we've seen the benefits of that in the low ground flock, that we're adding value, can be able to give us a direction and selection process on this flock. I think it's quite exciting times. I think it could, move the whole industry forward potentially.
And Sean, with those sheep, I suppose, excuse me, the data's building year on year.
Yeah.
So, and especially with maternal trait, it takes 3 or 4 years to get that in place. So that Eldenhope Cheviot flock will become a very useful resource as it matures, I think.
Yeah, so what's been the challenge, I suppose, in setting the whole thing up is the fact that, you're starting with the baseline with no recordings at all, and you've got to build the indexes to work your way through. So it's going to take, 3-4 years until you get to the level that you've got a proper selection process and get rams moving between. So we've got a second flock in the pipeline now too, so we can actually start moving genetics between the two and actually monitor 2 flocks, which will give us that extra benefit. All the rest of the lambs of this flock are then pushed into a store lamb enterprise to sell fat. So that's the ultimate goal of the rest of the lambs from these hill flocks moving forward. So just to mention about the purebreds, quite straightforward, but the crossbreds we're using to produce the extra third of cross lambs coming down are basically Aberdale and Aberfield. So we're probably one of Innovis's earliest multiplier flocks. We went back to the original Highlander import and Primera import of embryos into the country back in 2007. And we played with Highlanders for a while, and what we found was that the Highlander ewe itself performed really well, but ultimately my low ground flock, I needed to run off a blackies to add value to the blackies, but reduce my cost for the low ground flock in producing replacements. So we decided we would move away from the Highlander cross black at that point because we felt it wasn't a big enough ewe for us for what we needed. But also to boost the fertility on them. So that's where we have started looking at Aberdales with the Inverdale gene and the Aberfield. So we now run what do you call it, a first mob and the second mob. So the Aberfields are flushed in the field for tipping time, and the Aberdales go in when the field starts to get a bit bare. And that's how we flush them nowadays, because you don't need to flush an Aberdale. So the benefit for us, September time, October time is quite tight for grass for us because we've got all these hill lambs coming in. And it allows us then to tighten up our stock for breeding time. So our flushing area needs to be half of what it used to be, which is a big benefit for us. And then that allows us to manage the flock better. But we've got a ewe, the Aberdale ewe will, if you let it go and flush it, it'll produce like 300 scan%. So it's quite important to manage that properly. And there's nothing wrong with the sheep. It's all about the management of it in my mind. So yeah. So next slide, please. So other half of this is obviously the wether lamb operation. So it's quite important that we produce a ewe from these hill ewes. That's fit for purpose for the low ground flock. But the other half of it is half of them are wether lambs. So we then look at the carcass quality that we're producing for the wether lambs. So by traditional blackies and what you can add value by crossing a certain number of these. So and what we do find is, when you cross a hill ewe with an Aberfield or Aberdale, you produce a better type of carcass going forward, and you add value in weight and pounds to the lamb you're producing. What's quite interesting in this slide, as you can see, because the blackies were later being sold, there was a pickup in market price by the time we came to sell the blackies. So actually, the blackies sold for a dearer value. But what's interesting to the customer is you're probably adding about 10% extra hitting market spec. And market spec, I think, is averaging, was it 65, 70% of lambs that hit abattoirs hit market spec. So our blackies are hitting at 85%, which is really good, to be honest. But if you're adding that extra 10% in, it's going to make a big difference from a sale value of what your returns is on these lambs. And the Amark Hill spec is what I mean in spec, is basically an R, E, or U grade. And it's either 3L or a 3H. And that's what we would determine as market spec, although you get slight penalised on an R3H of 4 pence or whatever it is. So when you flat rate those prices and compare what they're like for like, the difference by adding an Aberfield ewe and 100 lambs, you're producing 520 quid more, which wasn't huge, but it was back in 2019 before these price rises. And that figure would be pretty big now compared to where it was back then. But the real interesting thing to us is the number of days on farm. So you're roughly cutting, 20 to 30 days off that lamb being on farm, which is quite important when you're costing your kale to finish them off, or if they're finishing off grass, then it's an extra cost of keeping them on farm, plus increasing the risk of losing them, i.e. deaths. Next slide. So the upland flock is roughly 1,300 crossbreds. So these are a mix really of, the Aberdale and Aberfields, as we discussed. But they're also encompassing about 400 now, purebred, Primera, Aberdale, Abertexas, Abermaxes. So we've got a bit of a mixture coming in there. And the reason we've got these flocks is, for us, it's a great thing because we're controlling the genetics within our own business, and it means we're producing ram lambs to use within our own business. So fortunately, Dewi doesn't get a lot of purchases of rams from it, but it does get the purchases of the pedigree stock. But it fits into our system because the whole thing works together. And the argument is we're, the whole system from the hill ewe right the way down to that fattening lamb on the low ground flock. We've got control of genetics right way through, and we can tailor that to suit ourselves. Because ultimately what we want as a producer is probably slightly different to what a lot of people need. And what we want is a lamb that's basically born without assistance, goes onto grass and finishes probably about 100 to 150 days later. And ultimately that's what we want to reduce our costs off grass. All the progeny off this flock is sold fat bar, what's a pedigree flock. And this flock's currently going at about 183% rearing at the moment. So it's been a bit variant recently because we've had the better changes on breeds and stuff, but that's where it has performed, and that's what we're aiming to do. Ideally, we'd like to get a bit higher than that. So we're slightly different to a normal family farm from that respect, because we've got a labour unit costing against that. And what we do find is if we drop to about 150%, that flock becomes the question on viability, because the labour unit fairly kills it fairly quickly. So if you've got a labour unit cost of 35, 40,000 against it, you need it to rear a lot of lambs, because if it doesn't have the output, it doesn't give you the returns. So next slide. So this is just a photo of the two different ewes we're kind of using that's producing from these blackies. So bear in mind the blackie ewe is a rough hill ewe. This is the type of ewes we're producing from them. And what we like with them both is, as you can see in the carcass conformation of the wether lambs, we're carrying that through into the ewes as well. So this allows us to use a plainer ram, I suppose, going forward, rather than having to go for a big muscly ram to give us the conformation on these fat lambs coming out of these ewes. But what we're finding with these low maintenance type ewes, and in the Ram Compare project, when we're weighing them all and looking at condition scores, ultimately, as I'm echoing what Ben's saying, condition of the ewe is paramount in their mating ability and the ability to milk off her back in the future and all the rest of it. So we want a ewe that can maintain condition, but we want the ewe to be quite small. We don't want this 90, 100 kilo ewe because it's expensive to feed. So we're aiming probably towards a 67, 68 kilo type ewe, and that's the type of ewes we're looking at. Bear in mind, these are cross ewes from a hill flock. Next slide. So the next enterprise we've got on the lamb front is the lamb front. So all the hill lambs get weaned off in kind of August, September time, and they get pooled into a big kind of fattening lamb operation. So we don't feed a lot of pellets as the main objective. We try and grow green crops to put into this. So the green crops fits nicely into a rotation, which means we take out fields out of grass, put them into kale, and then we put barley back into those fields to clean them up for weeds before re-entry for an 8-year lay going forward. So we grow high sugar grasses, red clovers and white clovers. And clovers, I think, are paramount in any grass ward going forward to one, reduce your fertilizer bill, but two, increase the quality of that pasture. We have dabbled with some multi-species swords and have had okay success with them, but we do struggle a bit with, especially in I think it's more of an area thing for us, is the lack of growth in these type of swords. They are plantain, and these take a long time to kind of warm up in the spring and get going. And that's what we probably find to a degree with clover as well. But if the grass swords are mixed clover and grass sword, we do find we get a quicker takeoff on them. And the fattening lamb enterprise runs fairly simply by block grazing. Well, at one point we had 1,200 lambs sitting on about a 25 hectare field, and they were all block grazed. So the field would be split into probably about a sixth, and then there'd be 1,100 lambs running on that block and grazing it off. These lambs are then weighed, and as similar to what Ben's doing with drafting, we would draft them off into their weight. So all these lambs on kale would all be sitting roughly about 34 kilos up the way, and the lambs behind them would be sitting on grass. And then as the bigger lambs get away, the lambs off grass come forward with slightly heavier weights and push them forward again on where we are. Next slide.
Sean, it would be right to say that you run a very circular system, don't you, where you use that digestate from the AD plant to actually for those crops that you grow. So yes. It's very
so it's quite interesting. We still do on the kale crops, we find quite difficult for establishment at times, so we do a pre-emergence application on all the kale, and that stops any weed competition onto them. But we do find flea beetles a huge challenge coming, and it's been worse over the last few years in growing kale crops. But one thing we have found that's been quite a good solution for it all is by going in with digestate onto the crop when it's sitting at that 2 to 4 leaf stage. What we're finding is that an application of that stops the flea beetle. It doesn't seem to like it. And we seem to, it's a win-win because you put in fertilizer onto the crop at the same time. So we've had great success with that front, and the kill crops are, tremendous. So yeah, I think that works quite well for us. It's a good way to reduce chemical usage and stuff as well. So anything that cuts costs and that kind of stuff out of the system is all the better. So just to run a few challenges that are probably coming forward, and probably nothing all applies to probably everyone's businesses in especially in the agri industry. But climate change, obviously, we're in that process now, and although when we built the flat plant in 2016, it would be built on the back of finance-driven, adding another income stream into the business, giving us a bit more security through another type of subsidy, which is feed-in tariff and RHI. But we kind of fell into it really from the point of view of climate change, because what it's done is it's mitigated and reduced our carbon footprint in a big way. So, the scale of business we're at the moment, we're probably about a third to half of a normal beef and sheep farm as far as carbon footprint is concerned, which is really very positive. Brexit, it's still kind of going to affect us for a number of years. Buying equipment, parts is going to be a big challenge for us. I'm not convinced that the import lamb issue, Australian lamb, New Zealand lamb is going to be a huge challenge for the next year or two. But as costs rise and for trying to move containers of the stuff across the world. However, it all depends where we are on pinch points, and it depends on the supermarkets and the customers supplying and all the rest of it. And I do think COVID has changed mindsets on the consumer's mindset on buying and what they want to buy. And I definitely do think there's been a huge change there. So I'd say Brexit, yeah, it's not over, but there's a fair bit of work to do on it. Price uncertainty is obviously, we've seen it in the egg sector, which I haven't covered a huge amount on the eggs, but it's been a huge challenge this last year, and there's been a huge change there. The supermarkets have come back and offered huge income potential or increases in egg prices to drive the system forward to make sure food security, and that's going to become quite important. I think the next one that will probably see that benefit, and we're already seeing a bit, is the beef sector. Whereas suckler cows and cull cows and store calves will probably see a price rise on the back of this, and as that filters through into the marketplace. Again, different business to where we are. Skilled labour is becoming a bit more of a challenge. We're very lucky with our team at the moment. We've got a team of 13 on the farm just now. I'm probably moving towards the older end of that category. Which is quite nice to see, because it's nice to have a young team roundabout and for future succession and all the rest of it. But we've got 2 shepherds that are over 60s. We've got another tractorman's due to retire next year. So succession is really important to us, and it's important that we bring these people into the industry. So we're still running apprentices on farms to try and bring them into the industry and slot them into wherever we need additional labour, and that fits in quite well with what we can do. However, like any industry or anyone you speak to in any industry just now, labour is going to become a bigger challenge, and technology will probably have to step in for some of the stuff to mitigate the amount of labour we might require in the future. Price uncertainty and cost of production has been kind of tied together. Fuel has been a huge sting last year. When you see what can you do when you had a fixed contract on fuel the year before at 42 pence a litre, and you peaked last year at £1.17. The self-propelled chopper now costs about £1,500 a day to run in fuel alone. So it's we're in a very different world to where we were. But I do think the price of fuel has obviously come back. It's sitting about 80 pence compared to where it was last year. So I'm hoping we'll see some benefit coming back on that front. I can't see lamb moving up a huge amount further, but I can see the beef job kind of come in a bit right compared to where it was, but it's never been that fancy when you look at profitability. Government policy, there's huge changes. Obviously, Ag Bill coming through. We're seeing it in Scotland, where we're behind where the English system and the Welsh system are, but it's been very slow forthcoming as to where we are. We've probably got quite a nice cushion compared to England, whereas we're guaranteed till 2024, but 2024 we don't know where we're going to be. So it's a huge issue when you've got a labour workforce that's costing you in excess of 600,000 a year, and not knowing where your money's going to come from to kind of balance the books on some of these enterprises. Moving on.
John, just before you go off that slide,
Yeah.
there's one question in terms of how much minimal till do you do? Do you plough, or do you still do no till?
So we've done a lot of work with tillage. So what we do find is when we direct drilled a lot of kale, we struggle to get a decent yield because it's all down to the tilth. And I think it's more of an area thing where we are. It's quite a lot of these fields are quite shaly, so they can dry out quite quickly. So sometimes a tilth helps the system where you can build moisture into that tilth and keep it going, whereas in the slot, it tends to dry out a bit and it would cause problems with us. So from kale, we don't need to plough again. We basically we basically go in with a min-till, like disc cultivator, rip the kale sward up, because ultimately you're keeping the best on top, i.e. where the lambs have been. And then you can go straight in with a stubble, with a drill. We just go in with a combination drill straight into that, and that works quite well for us. And that's reduced, a lot of soil breakdown and all the rest of it. So, and then after that, we were a bit of a conundrum. We did a min-till again, straight back into young grass. And that worked okay until we actually found that we were getting more and more weeds in the back of it. So we're now in a situation where we had fields been put back with min-till, and we're finding we're having to spray more. When you spray grass with clover on it, it's an expensive job. So we've actually gone back into cultivation and ploughing again back into grass, because you're putting that grass in for 8 years. It's counterproductive to put it in with a min-till system to reduce your risk, and then find you're actually having to spray most of the clover off with a spray. So we're at that point that we're trying to decide what to do and what's best to do. But I think we might go back with grass re-entry with ploughing if we feel it's a really weedy field, or we go back with a second crop of cereals to clean it up, and then go back in again with min-till to try and clean it up, so that cereals clean it up for pre-entry back to grass. So that's what we're playing with at the moment to try and get that right. We feel about the...
And I'm assuming, Sean, I'm assuming you're also ploughing in digestate, aren't you, with the first cropping for the winter crops? So.
Yes, so that's building in fertility part of it, really. And then, so obviously we've reduced the footprint. The biggest issue, or biggest release of gas potentially on any farm, especially arable farms, is fertilizer. Nitrous oxides are 236 times carbon dioxide. So if we can mitigate fertilizer, I think we've mitigated most of our problems, and we're already doing that with the digester, really. So the biggest output of gas we've got on farm is the enteric production that we get from our cows and their livestock on farm. So we see if we can go with that 8-year rotation, it kind of helps the buildup of carbon within their soils. Ultimately, I'd like to be able to come out altogether without doing ploughing, but I can't see it on our type of ground at the moment because of the issues we're having in crop production. So next slide. One of the biggest things that's probably influenced our business in the last wee while has been rotational grazing. So we've been at it since 2012. So we've been measuring a 100-acre block at that point. And just to go back to 1,000 feet block, 100 acres sits by itself, and we used to carry 300 ewes on it, and that was it. Maybe cut 15 acres of silage, and that was that. So we had a Welshman came to see us, Gareth Grassland came to see us and did some consultancy with us when early days. And I remember sitting in the field with Gareth, and he was saying, well, okay, Gareth, it's your trial. We'll listen to you. Let's go with this, because if we don't try it, we don't know. So Gareth told us about 400 ewes, and then we'd see what we'd cut silage and all the rest of it. Well, the first year we did it, we carried 25% more sheep on the same block, same amount of fertilizer put on, and we actually cut 35 acres of silage off it, which was twice what we cut before. And we thought, God, that can't be right. That must be just a one-off. It must be a good year. So we thought, right, we'll do a second year, did the same again. Second year, we cut 65 acres of silage, carried 400 ewes. And so we thought, no, this is definitely something in this. So fair play, Gareth opened their eyes to it all, and it's definitely been a game changer, because what we do now is we measure 400 acres weekly, or every fortnight, and we monitor to see how each mob is going. And from our point of view, you know, we're now maxing out. So what that block there is when you look at it, there's the same block we measured on the 18th of May, and the other one was on the 2nd of June. And you can see the kilos of live weight it was carrying at that point. So my tonnage was 4.9 tons a hectare of live weight on that block, and I increased it in June because we were having more and more growth. And it was then up at nearly 6.9 tons of live weight per hectare. So I'm maxing out what I can do with that low ground. And the interesting thing was there was no fertilizer put on that block, so it's literally just had digestate most of the time to drive it forward. So if we can maximize that out and pull more out of it, and what I do now is I just keep cutting areas of silage on the surplus. I'll have a mob of, say, we'll run something like 20 hectare block, and they'll carry like 200 to 300 ewes with lambs, twins with them, and then we will just mob graze around the paddocks, and then as the paddock's empty, we'll go in with digestate to put in behind it. So the digestate thing works quite well, because obviously I can't put fertilizer with digestate when the sheep are in the field. And then if we then can see that paddock 1 is miles ahead, we can then say we need to cut that field of the system. And this AgriNet system allows us to monitor, you know, what the best quality of grass is to match the quality to what we're producing, basically. Next. Just give you an insight of what's new and what we're currently doing. So we've got smack stick boluses in the cows that tell us when they're calving, when they're cycling, when they're not feeling well. That's quite a good system to give us a bit more information on what each individual cow. So rather than doing a scan and looking at the overall herd, we're able to look at every individual cow to see how well they're cycling. So all, 540 cows are calving within the 8 weeks, so it's quite a tight calving window. And those boluses have allowed us to do that, because what they're doing, we've reduced it from 12 weeks down to 8, and we're then able to monitor the cows to drive that forward. We use drink water wear, so we're an agri epicenter demonstration farm, so we get quite a lot of bits of technology chucked at us to trial out and see. So the water weighers was one of them. So the store cattle have a water drinking trough, and what they do is when they go and get a drink of water, they weigh themselves in the process, and the ear tag reads, and it tells us, we can log into the cloud and see how that animal's doing. It's quite interesting, because every time you handle cattle, they get stressed, and you'll probably knock their growth rate off for probably about a week until they come back into the loop. So these kind of mitigate that by means you're not stressing them out by weighing them and stuff. Sheep front, we're doing quite a lot on the FEC pack. We've been doing FEC pack for a number of years, but we're also starting to do TST, as they call it, or target selective treatment. So where you're weighing all the lambs, and any lambs that's gaining less than, say, 150 grams a day gets pulled off because there's a worm burden in them. And it's quite interesting, because we will dose very, very little until you get to kind of August time. Probably the last few years has been a bit challenging, because what you'll see is there's this massive change in weather patterns. The rain comes in, and you've got huge challenges of worm levels coming into the system. So it's quite good to monitor this on a bi-weekly basis. So every week we're weighing these lambs consistently, and then we're also tracking everything right through, which is giving us a lot of detail. So we start weighing lambs at 8 weeks. So we do the 8-week check for the pedigrees, but we also start weighing all the lambs at 8 weeks now. And we weigh the lambs every fortnight after that, just to give us a draw of fat lambs. The pedigrees don't get weighed as often, but they get weighed again at 12 weeks to do the weaning, or between 10 and 12 weeks, depends on when we decide to wean. But what we do find now is we're at 8 weeks of weight, we're actually drawing fat lambs off at that point. And that's working well for us, that we keep drawing into them at that point, because ultimately that's when the best lambs will sell, i.e. they're selling for the most money, most profit, and all the rest of it. So We have a drone on farm where we basically use it quite a lot for livestock, but we're also starting to look at crop yields and stuff with it, and that's another agri epicenter thing. On the back of the DNA profiling of sheep, we started DNA profiling deer herds, so that's given us, well, probably one of the first in UK that's doing DNA profiling, I think, Dewi, isn't it? And we see that exactly the same. There's no EBVs or anything in deer in the UK currently, but there is in New Zealand, so we're looking to tie in with the New Zealand system to get a bit more data on how the selection process is for deer. We've just installed soil moisture and temperature monitors, so we can now just log into them and see when's best to give us, for sections of the farm to see when's best to apply any digestate, or when's good to look at, applying stuff onto crop or whatever. So we're thinking the moisture thing is going to be quite good for us, because it's quite handy to know, traveling capability as well, because some of the land is outlying, has to be hauled in by tanker, so it's quite heavy. But then most of the other stuff's done by umbilical, which saves a lot of time. Communication, I think, as Ben says, is really important, that we kind of sell the industry to our future customers. I would say, we do quite a lot of farm visits through the Royal Highland Educational Trust, but we're also Lincoln Environment and Farming demonstration farm, and we bring, pre-COVID, we'd bring in about 2,000 to 2,500 people in a year onto the farm to visit, and I think that's really, really important. Between farmer bus trips, school visits, and general open days through leaf farming open day. Open Farm Sunday, I mean. So these things are, we've all got to do our bit potentially to help the industry. There's no point in us complaining that the local consumer's not interested if we're not going to promote what we're doing, and promote to the future customers. Cost reduction, these are the type of stuff we've been doing. We built a lagoon storage, so we've sussed out fairly quickly with the AD plant that we've got 6 months storage, but the problem is it's built into a gas tank, and you try and extract it all within a few months to get as much slurry out as you can. You start affecting the gas process, so you haven't got that massive bund available to you at the time. So we built a lagoon for that storage, and we've just given us a bit of belt and braces. So we've now got probably the guts of 8 months storage now on farm. And in turn has helped the biogas plant, because we're now able to keep the second digester that was in storage full of gas all the time, which has reduced what we're feeding the plant. We've also been looking at silage clamps. So we had a silage clamp that sat away from home a bit, so we were hauling all the stuff there and hauling it back again. Cost of fuel where it is, it doesn't make economical sense to have the pit away from home. So if by reducing cost and time, it's just like a big saving in its own right. But clamp silage to bale silage, so we've increased the capacity on clamp silage, because the difference between bale silage and clamp silage is roughly, well, it was £8 a tonne before all the cost rises. You're probably talking more like £10 or £15 a tonne now. It's a big difference. So yeah, future developments. So we're now moving into the realms of variable rate soil analysis. We've been doing quite a bit of it for a number of years, but now we're starting to look at variable rate digestate application and stuff like that. So this is the means to balance soil crops and balance the field areas. You can see the dark and light colours, but you can see the red field on the right-hand side. The field above it, you can see how the other one above it split into 4 sections and a difference. Well, that's actually the rotational grazing kicking in from 0 grass up to plenty of grass at the end of the paddock there. So it's quite interesting to see that if we can balance those colours within the fields, it kind of helps the whole growth process and keeps our paddocks kind of consistent. We're moving slowly towards a drone measuring grass, but there's a few challenges. We've looked at sonar systems, we've looked at satellite measuring, and it's just like nothing's consistent with the plate meter. But whether it's the plate meter is wrong and they're right. But the problem is I find the plate meter I can work with, I know how it works, and it's easy keyed into a program. So I'm finding it very difficult to find another system that can match that. We've just got delivery of no fence collars to trial on a hill block for outwintering cows. So we've got 100 cows that winter outside, so we're trialing that at the moment. So we're actually just busy charging batteries for them at the moment to go into the trial with that. And that's going to be really interesting from a point of view of hill grazing, but potentially paddock grazing in the summer for the cows as well. So that's going to be quite interesting going forward. Smart tags are basically a product for cows again that you monitor pneumonia in calves. So This is going to give us a bit more data similar to what the boluses do in the cows, but we don't have anything in the calves, which will probably allow us to monitor calves way before you see any symptoms. You know, this is what we've seen in the cows, is the cows will tell you that she's not feeling well, but you actually look at her, she looks all right. But then 3 days later, she's maybe not cleansed properly, and then you've got a big problem. So it's given us a head start on disease control, although you're still using the antibiotics at that stage, but it's better to use at that point than putting piles in later on to try and fix the problem. So it's mitigating before it gets to a big problem. And then the variable dose gun is obviously looking at reducing wormers and what we're doing, so you're actually accurately dosing to the weight of that individual lamb or cow. I think that's me. I suppose I should go back to what Ben was saying. Reasoning for becoming a member of Innovis system was 2 things, really. The genetics that they gave us met the market supply chain that we're needing to meet, and it also allowed us to cater the genetics to what we needed with the breeding program, i.e. I need fertility for my low ground. I want my hill flock to be hardy. Hence we moved to the hill flock to try and encourage, because that's 50% of my genetics in the low ground flock, which has never been recorded. So Innovis has given us that benefit to be able to look at EBVs, drive the system, and given us a marker to select the sheep going forward. Main targets, I suppose, in the flock from our point of view is we've just taken all. We've been doing all ewe lamb and rams that's been selected for either sale or for breeding have all been anything below average has never been kept. So we've not been doing that for the last 2-3 years. But we're now starting to move to the top 25% and keeping them only, because ultimately, you know, we want these rams to move forward in everyone's flocks, but also we want them to work better in our flocks if we decide to keep them for ourselves as well. So yeah, the system is working well for us.
Yeah, Sean, and Sean would have equally impressive graphs to Ben in terms of what the flocks are doing, because very data driven, very objective, as you can see in how Sean runs the whole operation, really, and with a great team of people around it. So yeah, thank you, Sean. I won't take it. Well, I think we've dealt with most questions as we go, but we'll go straight to Matt, if that's all right, so that he doesn't get the grave that and people want to actually listen to him as well at the end there. So anyway, Matt, over to you, sir.
Cheers, Dewi. Evening, everyone. A big thanks to Dewi for asking me to follow Sean and Ben. It's a great way to put your life into perspective following that presentation, isn't it? So apologies to everyone for a slight drop in scale, a slight drop in quality and detail of speaker as well, but I'll give it a go at least. So although I'm always asked to do these sort of talks and my name seems to be on most things at the moment, we're very much a family farm. So I'm very fortunate. I'm a 3rd generation of Harding to farm at the same place, and 3rd generation of Harding to be selling breeding rams from the farm as well. So I'm very lucky. My dad, Charles, my mum, Jan, still very much part of the business, and my wife is as well. My daughters don't really contribute a lot at the moment, but we think they're worth keeping about as well. Yeah, thank you. So where we farm, a very tough part of the country, very similar to a lot of Sean's land that we've just been discussing. The hills of Leicestershire. The photo on the left there is from the top of one of our tallest hills that runs up to almost 100 feet above sea level, down into the valley as well. So we're in a very kind part of the country. If I'm honest, now the summer is a harder time of the year than winter in recent years gone past. We're very dry over sort of just slightly on the east side of Leicestershire, so the summer is quite a challenge now for us. We own 180 acres, so we're back down in talking about tens of acres rather than thousands of hectares, I'm afraid. But we own a small ring fence farm. We rent a little bit of permanent pasture around that. And then one of our challenges, or our biggest challenges, is an opportunity as well. We're surrounded by big arable units. Still very difficult to try and join that together with actually a full year-round production opportunity within an arable unit, but there is very good wintering options. So keeps changing. We sort of rotate our arable farmers as much as we rotate our grassland, to be honest, but we're in a good situation now with a big arable farm that is putting in a lot of forage rye and vetch into their system, which is working really nicely. We've got lots of acres to go out in the winter, which works really well for us, and growing on rams. The picture on the right sort of sums up the crop, so it's probably closer to 250 acres this year, but in places it's very good and in other places it's not very good, but they've got a lot of space, and it's also being followed with following that it goes into maize, so we've actually got it for most of March as well. So that's a really great addition to the business, which we've had in the last couple of years, really. The rest of the farm, that's thanks, Larry. The rest of the farm is now 100% grassland. About 100 acres of that is in a 5-year reseed into mainly herbal lays and some GS4 as well, and the rest of it is in long-term permanent pasture type grassland. We bring in some store cattle in the spring that really we use as a leader follower behind mobs of ewes and lambs, and then we sell them as and when the grass dictates, or it sort of makes sense, really. So they're very flexible within the grazing program. Okay. But so to just put us a bit of background into our business, we're very much coming at this from the other direction to Sion and Ben. Obviously, from their point of view, very good, excellent commercial farms that have then moved into ram breeding. We've always been ram breeders. My granddad actually used to breed Shropshire rams before 1960. And then this newfangled, exciting composite breed called the Suffolk came along, and they got involved in that in 1960. So we've had a Suffolk flock on the farm since then. And from the time we've had that, although it is very much a pedigree breed, a pedigree flock, it has had to pay the bills. So it's either was paying the rent or subsequently paying the mortgage. So it's had to be producing enough rams to sell to enough people to actually make some money out of it, which has always been quite a driver. So while they were very successful in showing as well, they were always selling upwards of 100 rams to commercial farmers. And I've been very lucky that I grew up with people that were some of the first to performance record with Signet in the UK, some of the first to use CT scanning and other technologies. So we've always had that kind of commercial focus, even if it was in a very pedigree orientated flock. One of the biggest differences looking backwards is the fact that we were what I call a traditional ram breeder, in the fact we were lambing early and trying to sell all of those rams within the first 12 months. So they were being born in January, creep feeding as heavily as we really could to sell them at sales in July, August and September. And even with that sort of focus on performance, as you can see in the picture there, if you're selling at a market, in reality, you have to be as big or bigger than the competition. So it does turn into a feeding or a dressing competition. And that only really seemed to get more a bigger deal as we went further on, rather than reducing. It always got more and more of a feeding competition, if we're honest. So if we move on, Dewi. So the drivers for change in the business were quite clear, really. This is going back to sort of 2008 to 2010. The biggest one was economics. As I said, the ram business was, or is, and always has been the main enterprise on the farm for bringing in money, and we could see that we were starting to lose customers. Excuse me, or loosing customers even. So maybe we had them all in a room and we loosed them out. That's a bit of a spell check there. So we were losing customers, and we started to ask people that were moving away from us, or people that were still buying, what the main problem was. And there were a variety of problems, if I'm honest, but the vast majority came down to ram longevity and then not holding condition, going off such an intensive system, being pushed so heavily, then going out into commercial farm and asking those guys to serve a lot of ewes and live on very little just didn't work. So we were starting to lose business because of that. So something was going to have to change. At the same sort of time as that, I was actually working in the pig industry. So I did a degree at Harper Adams, and then I went and got involved in the pig industry with the Pig Improvement Company, which were bought out by Genus. So we're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, livestock genetics companies in the world. So quite an experience. Can't say I ever really liked pigs, which was the challenge. But it was a massive eye-opener for me, for going from a ram breeding system where really our objective was to get that ram to look the best it possibly could on the day of sale. My job in the pig industry was working with commercial farms to get the best out of the genetics they'd already bought. So it was, the boar was completely irrelevant all of a sudden. Nobody even actually saw it really. And most of it arrived in a semen packet. So it was all about performance on farm for the commercial farmer, and that mindset shift was quite big, and also the level of detail in terms of survival rates, feed conversion rates, and understanding their performance was absolutely clinical. And I was suddenly having to understand that and try and find genetics that were going to perform on that unit, which I thought was very new for me, and a real it sort of triggered a bit of a light bulb moment for what we should be doing at home with the ram breeding. Also within the pig industry, there's a lot of composite breeding, and the advantages of looking for genetics from different breeds to speed up genetic improvement was also very interesting. So I thought there was plenty of opportunities for the sheep industry. Little did I know that there was somebody in Wales doing it on a far bigger, far more detailed basis than I'd been for about 10 years before I'd even thought of it. So fortunately, that very nice Welshman took me out for a meal one day and gave me a job, and has also asked me to talk tonight. That was Dewi, obviously. And so I joined Innovis back in about 2011, 12. And Dewi's very good at giving you a very big title and making you feel really important. So I think I was a business development manager for most of the UK, which resulted in basically being a sales rep for Leicestershire. But generally, it was a great opportunity, and obviously getting involved in Innovis breeding sheep from quite an early stage was a massive opportunity, and it ticks a lot of the boxes that I just sort of learned within the pig industry, which was quite exciting. And the main thing was breeding sheep on a commercial system under commercial conditions, fit for purpose for where they're going to go and perform, which was the key. Now, at the same time as all of that was happening, in a very, very small scale, I'd started using some very high indexed Charolais genetics that carried the Myomax gene, and sort of mixing those with some of our Suffolk genetics to produce a few crossbred animals on our farm. Now, Dewi's always very interested in new things, and at the same time he employed me, thought there might be some mileage in that, and he was already doing something similar with another breeding partner, David Roster, down in Dorset. And so we scaled that up quite quickly with a lot more focus from Janet within the breeding team at Innovis. And we'll move on to the next slide, Larry. There we go. And that sort of evolved pretty quickly from sort of 2012 to where we are now into the Aber Black, which is the main breed that we breed here at Lodge Farm now, and the main breed within Innovis that we breed as well. And so that went from a little bit of crossbreeding to now having about a 200 ewe Aber Black nucleus flock of Aber Black ewes that go to Aber Black rams, and then still an element of first crossing that to get some new blood into the system as well. And as you can see from the index graph within there, it's been incredibly exciting how quickly we've been able to make improvements within that breed in terms of production and performance traits, while sort of improving some of the functional traits that have always been a challenge to improve within the Suffolk as well. So that's
Matt, we've just had a question go up, and it's probably a good time to answer it from Stuart Doran, saying, is the Aber Black a straightforward Charolais cross Suffolk?
No, that's a fair comment, and although that's kind of how it started in a way. No, it's been fixed for a while now, and it would be, if you want to put percentages on, it's probably 2/3 Suffolk and 1/3 Charolais. To give it a percentage wise, we found with the first crosses, when the Suffolk and Charolais were mixed, there was a lot of thin skin lambs still being born, so we had to put some more Suffolk in there just to toughen it up a little bit, which creates the sort of fixed Aberblack flock that we've got. I still do bring in some well recorded high index Charolais as sweeper rams within the Suffolk flock to find any new blood that might come in, and if anything works from that, they might then enter the Aberblack flock as a bit further down the line, but no, it's not quite a straightforward first cross.
Thanks.
And the other thing that's been really rewarding for me, because enjoy the breeding side as much as anything, has been sort of the feedback from customers. We're still obviously within the Innovis portfolio, the Aberblack is still quite a small breed, but there's a lot of people that have tried it, that have stuck with it and have got great performance and are now, sort of building their business around that being their main terminal sire, and the feedback has been really, really positive. So that's been great to see. So we're trying to, as everyone on this has said, trying to keep improving it and keep increasing the numbers as much as we can, really. Okay. But the biggest changes that I suppose the Innovis have really, the link with Innovis has really driven within the business. So as I've sort of summarized where we were before this move, was that we were a creep feeding, early lambing flock, producing rams in a way that we were looking after them as well as we possibly could. We've moved that to everything now. Even our Suffolk flock is on a forage only system. So as has been touched on, grassland management has had to be, my level of grassland management has had to improve drastically. Everything will be now rotationally grazed. We do grow, because of where we are in the country, herbal lays work really well for us. I know that picture there is of a nice grass and clover lay, but we now, all of our reseeds will go into a mixed species sward, and then we have GS4 that we finish lambs onto as well. And that, just because of the dry part of the country that we're in, that does seem to work really well for us. Everything will be into rotations, and the fact that we are now able to produce Suffolk rams that are fit for sale off grass without concentrates is quite an achievement. So yeah, it's that's been a huge change in the business and a big learning curve. The next big change really is the level of detail that we're now recording and the feedback that we're getting back. So I've grown up only ever knowing that you're meant to weigh a lamb when it's born as its first job. That's all we've ever done here, and we've always measured 8-week weights and 12-week weights and muscle and back fat scanned. But it's the functional measurements that I think are key that we've added in. So the lambing ease, the lamb vigor, as Janet, the geneticist, would always say, the deaths, which are so key, survival, and reasons for culling within the flock. And as has been mentioned, the body condition scoring throughout the system. And then the great thing that we get back from Innovis is the feedback in terms of our own flocks and how they're performed, and differences between size within that. And it's been able to ensure we're now selecting for a far different animal than we were 10 years ago because of the data we're getting back. So we're selecting for a far more functional, robust animal than we ever were before. The picture on the right is to show that that's like the worst day we've ever had in Leicestershire. We were actually lambing and it snowed a little bit. I know I'm not going to get much sympathy off Sion or Ben, but I think that just summarises the fact that we've moved from a system where, as I say, we were looking after these animals to try and make them look at their very best, to sell them, to the point where now we're trying to test these animals and treat them and literally test them under commercial conditions to really see which ones can hack the system. Even if our system might be a lot kinder than some of the others on here, we're trying to test sheep that can perform and convert forage and produce growth and meat as quick as we can. So just a mindset change as much as anything, really.
Matt, I've just got a couple of questions which
Yes.
we can answer now, I think, if it's possible. Cormac's just asked, how would you rate Aberblack's performance versus the Suffolk and the other terminals in Innovis? Now, obviously, they're much better than any other Innovis terminal, which you'd say.
Thank
But
you, Dewi.
how would you place in terms of the Aberblack and the Suffolk in terms of your production at home?
It's a very good question, and I, as Cormac would know, because he's tried to ask me this on Twitter a few times. I try not to answer that question, being a politician, but generally, in terms of live weight growth, on farm the Suffolk is still faster, but as soon as you kill that animal, the Aberblack kill out percentage is a lot better. So if you looked at carcass growth rate, then the Aberblack would be on par, if not ahead. The biggest thing still, although we've used New Zealand Suffolk, is at lambing ease and vigour of the Aberblack is a big jump up, and their ability to hold condition, whether that's the ram or we see it from the ewe flock, and the lambs from a this is feedback back from customers, but the Aberblack lambs are fit for a lot longer, so they don't go through that sort of rangy phase that you can still get with a Suffolk. The challenge with the Aberblack versus a Suffolk is you get such a variety still in terms of colour and phenotype. If you're trying to match for a live market, the Suffolk stamps them. If you're producing ewe lambs, there's still an element that the Suffolk might do a better job, but as an all-round terminal, then it's the Aberblack's hard to beat, really.
And in terms of actually looking at those lines, Cormac, all the Innovis lines have been recorded as one population from the beginning, so we can actually run Aberblacks, Primeras, Abermaxes all under one evaluation, which is what we do. But they're evaluated in slightly different selection indexes because they do slightly different things. So, for example, more emphasis is put on Aberblack's growth rate, muscling, not too much emphasis on fat because we actually want them to finish quite quickly. So within those populations of sheep, you could actually select on their individual indexes and on individual breeding values, sheep that will be similar, sheep that will be better in some traits than others. But I wouldn't be able to tell you which is the best in terms of, it's a horse for a course, really. But they do seem to do a very good job for people out there. So the blacks. And Matt, and just the second question before we move on is, we've just got a question from Peter asking, what system do you use to collect the data on farm?
In terms of data capture,
I think performance recording on farm. I think what do you use?
Yeah, well, so everything from like we've got a combi clamp, so from that level we use that, and we've got an XR3000, so we're on true test. We actually run so everything will come through that we can send direct to either Signet or Innovis. We are using Farmax as well from a grassland management point of view, and I actually use Farm Plan just from an actual management software for the business accounts as well. I don't know whether that answers everything that Peter might have asked.
Yeah, and I think from a general point of view, Peter, in terms of how we deal, all our breeding partners, we give very much flexibility to systems they prefer to use. But generally, most of the data capture happens on true test equipment because we can actually export and upload into CRV files, and we can format all sorts of different fields on those XR5000 boxes and ones. So we tend to use true test for most of the data capture. The genetic evaluations all are done with Janet with some quite sophisticated software with her and Kim. But different breeding partners will use different farm management packages at farm level. So sorry, Matt, back to your, hopefully that answers Peter's question.
Yeah, well, I think that was it. So you've kind of preempted me just to where we've got to in terms of in the system for this year, just to put us in context of numbers wise. So the Aberblacks are now the majority of what we're selling. And we have a small Aberfield flock which sort of fits on that permanent pasture element of higher health. So we're MV accredited, and all of those, our Aberfield flock is scrapie genotype 1, which means we can export out of them, which is really the main reason for having an Aberfield flock on our farm, really, but it works quite nicely. And yeah, that would be where we're at.
And Matt, I think, although you make light of it, you've moved your Suffolk genetics hugely forward as well, haven't you, in terms of their ability to actually perform from a forage-based system. You've got Suffolk that will hold flesh, will hold condition, and will thrive. And I think that's probably a common element across all your 3 lines. You've taken that approach from a challenging your sheep to farming them in this way, which pays dividends for customers.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in reality, being part of the Innovis team and using Janet and yourself and also some of the Innovis genetics, certainly in Aberfield, it's been relatively easy to find that, you know, we've got a farm that can grow good quality grass, and if we put those genetics on it, then they've always sort of flown. The Suffolks, we went through a fairly painful 4 or 5 years where we tried to take a flock of sheep that was used to having a bag in front of them to try to teach them what the green stuff was underneath their feet, and that was quite a painful experience financially and moral, sort of morale as well. But we have, yeah, a bit of New Zealand genetics has definitely helped, and some other breeders that are doing it, and some hard selection at home, and we've got, yeah, what we think is a very functional, solid Suffolk flock that can convert grass and grow pretty quickly now. So yeah,
thank you, Matt, that's really useful. And I think it's important probably just to make the point that although this might come across a bit salesy, which we're not at all intending it to be, what we want is the story of the people involved in the breeding. And we're very, very fortunate as a business that we've actually got this caliber of breeders or farmers within our structure, and we really couldn't do what we do without these guys, and they give as much back to us in terms of learnings and market intelligence as we do in terms of providing the service, if you like. So it's very much, there is a common thread there, I think, with it all. There's this commercial reality, there is this desire to make a product that customers can use and can work for customers and succeeds, because these guys actually have farms that they needed to have to do, you know, those successes need to happen at home for them as well. So I think there is very much a customer focus. There is much a very straightforward, honest approach to it all. It's very much work in progress, and I think all 3 of you would probably agree. You know, there's plenty of things that we're constantly trying to improve, and we'd be very naive to think that we weren't in that position with it all. But yeah, so I think we've dealt with pretty much all the questions as we've gone along. I'm just conscious of time for people, that it's 9:10 and some of you may not have had your tea. I'm just going to check. Okay, so there is one more question up here, which probably I'll have to answer actually, guys, which is final question is for me. Are Innovis looking at anything in the easy care shedder hair sheep in the future? It is an easy one to answer, and that is yes, I suppose. We historically, we're always very conscious not to become, not to have a Chinese menu of breeds, and it becomes quite confusing for people with all the composites. So we try and keep things fairly straightforward. There is an Aberfield line that has a derivative that actually is a self-replacing one, where it has a bit of clean mixed in with it. We're also taking some of those Aberfield sheep and creating a shedding stroke hair version of it. And that's simply because we've got too many of our customers turning around to us and saying, we like the genetics, we like what the sheep do, but we can't live with wool anymore. Now, that's obviously an individual business decision. So we have embarked on a sort of a shedding hair program. We're working closely with Xlanas. We've been using Xlana genetics and some easy care genetics. But the sort of the goal is to actually create an Aberfield type animal that sheds, that doesn't need shearing. We're probably year 4 into the program, and we just expanded the numbers this year into 3 flocks with a 4th on its way in. we're producing very few sheep, probably about 30 a year currently. And we have been offering Exlana rams to people through 2 of our sales to help meet that demand, purely because we feel that the Exlanas are very close to our mindset and our ethos and how they breed. So we are working towards that. It'll probably slightly bigger crossbreeding option to people. We haven't got a name for them. We call them Abershedders, which is an awful name. So that'll develop as time goes on, and it's very much work in progress. But yeah, there will be more sheep as we come through. Like I say, I think we've got 45 shearlings destined for this year, so it is increasing gradually. But like all sheep breeding, it's very much work in progress to get the shedding pattern working properly, to get the performance and the phenotype to go along with that. So it's not something that'll happen overnight, but yeah, it's underway with us. So, and like I say, the other element we're also looking to work at is actually increasing the value of the wool you have got. So we are exploring the opportunity to drop micron in some of our maternal breeds. So we can actually create a bit of a marketing story for some of these with the wool board, who are actually quite proactive now. And we can actually hopefully add value to people that are shearing, that have wool. So I wouldn't for a minute dismiss wool as a byproduct. I think there are plenty of opportunities with wool. We just need to think about it in a slightly different way. And rather than a byproduct, we need to think of it as something much more valuable and actually start putting some consistency, both in terms of the breeding and in terms of the processing at farm level. And I think we can build quite a nice story for that into the marketplace. So yeah, we will be looking at side sampling some sheep this next year. And we will be looking to drop micron on some of the maternal breeds. So one will be shedding, but the other will be actually trying to look at wool quality to actually make it a slightly more viable option for people. We're always moving with things, as these guys know. We don't really stand still. Matt will smile. He'll remember all those heady days of what next. So, grand. I will draw us to a close if that's all right. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Matt. Sterling job as usual in terms of giving us a straight talking presentation of what you're all about. And yeah, we're very fortunate and we thank you all. And there will be a recording, I think, that Laurie will send out to people shortly. And any of you that want to look at diseases, we will have the next webinar with our vet, Pierce Davis, which I think is on the 9th of February. So where we'll be discussing the dreaded iceberg diseases and all the other mitigation things you can do at farm level, which is the other quite important thing, obviously, out there. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. If you haven't registered, please do so. Laurie will be sending information out. And on that, we will wish you good night. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for staying with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.